He once embodied the very image of aristocratic grace, with a voice as smooth as vintage wine and a smile that made even the coldest rooms in Hollywood warm with admiration. But behind that charming exterior and the silver screen glamour lay a very different story. A life etched not just in spotlight, but in silence. David Niven was not merely a star. He was a man who carried war in his past, secrets in his soul, and a loneliness that fame could never quiet. His was a journey that began in military ranks, rose through golden studios, and ended not with the roar of applause, but in the fading quiet of an abandoned villa, far from the glowing lights that once adored him. By the time of his passing in 1983, the world had all but turned the page, yet his legacy remained deeply imprinted on film, literature, and the whispered corners of old Hollywood. Adjusted for today, he left behind a fortune nearing $100 million. Not bad for a man who once stood behind enemy lines long before he ever stood before a camera. His career unfolded like a tapestry of elegance and wit, starring in over 100 films, including the whimsical adventure of Around the World in 80 Days, the sly humor of the Pink Panther, and his satirical spin on Bond in Casino Royale. But it was his performance in Separate Tables that truly carved his name into cinematic history, earning him an Academy Award and a permanent place among the greats. Before all the red carpets and studio contracts, Niven served with distinction in World War II, eventually reaching the rank of lieutenant colonel. He didn't boast about it. In fact, he rarely mentioned it, but it added a quiet dignity to his public image, a reminder that beneath the tuxedos and clever lines lived a man who had seen loss, sacrifice, and the raw edge of history. His military service may not have brought him wealth, but it gave him something deeper, a kind of gravitas that can't be bought or taught. David Niven's life was not the tale of a flawless star, but of a man who wore elegance like armor and humor like a shield. A man who lit up the world while privately walking through shadow. And in the end, when the cameras turned away and the applause faded, his story remained. One of charm, war, brilliance, sorrow, and a strange kind of solitude that only time has the patience to understand. James David Graham. Niven came into the world on March 1, 1910, in London's Belgrave Mansions, greeted not just by his parents, but by the shadow of war that would soon change everything. He was named David, fittingly, as he arrived on St. David's Day. Though he liked to claim he was born in the rugged Scottish town of Kirriemuir, the truth lay plainly on his birth certificate. His family was a blend of military tradition and artistic flair. His sister Grizel would one day sculpt the iconic Bessie Award for literary excellence, while their father, a Scotsman through and through, lost his life in the brutal Gallipoli campaign when David was just 5. His mother, a Welsh-born daughter of a soldier who died at Isandlwana, remarried a conservative politician, Sir Thomas Comyn Platt, a man young David and Grizel openly despised. Rumors swirled for decades that Comyn Platt may have been David's real father. Some of his siblings believed it. Even Niven himself is said to have acknowledged it privately before his death. After the loss of their London home, the family moved to a drafty cottage on the Isle of Wight, where the wind decided which door worked on which day. Despite its quirks, it became David's refuge, especially when his mother barred her new husband from joining them during holidays. But peace didn't last. At age 6, David was sent to boarding school, where abuse, bullying, and strict discipline carved deep scars. One sadistic teacher, Mr. Kroom, left Niven with a permanently bent ear and no fondness for Latin. Years later, Niven returned to confront the man, only to find the school abandoned, the ghosts of his childhood haunting empty corridors. Expelled for mischief and denied a place at Eton, He bounced from school to school until landing at Stowe, where a kind headmaster finally saw past the antics to the potential. At 18, he had a brief, scandalous affair with Margaret Wigham, later Duchess of Argyll, which led to a pregnancy and a hush-hush abortion. Her affection for him never faded. She mourned him publicly decades later. Niven's next chapter began at Sandhurst, where he earned his commission as a British Army officer. He longed for the kilted regiments, but instead got the tartan-trousered Highland Light Infantry, serving in Malta and Dover. He grew restless in peacetime, especially when a lecture on machine guns clashed with a promising dinner date. When asked for questions, he simply replied, "Could you tell me the time, sir? I have a train to catch." With that, he walked out of the military and into a life that would take him from the battlefield to the bright lights of Hollywood. Before he became the personification of suave British charm, David Niven was just another hopeful in Hollywood trying to get a foot in the door. And for a time, that door was firmly shut. Without the right paperwork, he had to leave the United States and ended up in Mexico, not as an actor, but as a gunman polishing rifles for American hunters. Only when his birth certificate arrived from Britain did the doors to central casting finally open, branding him, rather generically, as Anglo-Saxon type number 2008. Yet from those early blink and you'll miss him parts in Mutiny on the Bounty and Barbary Coast, something in his crisp wit and refined ease stood out. Samuel Goldwyn noticed, and just like that, Niven's star began to rise. He wasn't instantly famous, but momentum gathered. He flitted between studios, picking up roles from bumbling aristocrats to romantic soldiers. He played Bertie Wooster, shared the screen with Errol Flynn, and began cultivating that rakish on-screen persona. Hollywood grouped him among its elite British set, what came to be affectionately known as the Hollywood Raj. Films like The Dawn Patrol and Bachelor Mother nudged him toward stardom, but it was Raffles, 1939, that finally gave him the title role and the dignity of top billing. But just as his career caught fire, the real war began. While other British stars stayed in the safety of California, Niven returned home, rejoining the British Army and later transferring to the elite commandos. He led reconnaissance missions, worked on top-secret operations, and served alongside Churchill and Glenn Miller. He downplayed it all in later years, sprinkling war stories with charm rather than drama. "You chaps only have to do this once," he joked to his men, "but I'll have to do it again in Hollywood with Errol Flynn." After the war, Niven's return to acting was bumpy. Tragedy struck with the death of his wife, and Goldwyn, his longtime mentor, saddled him with mediocre roles. But then came The Bishop's Wife, and then The Moon is Blue, a daring romantic comedy that pushed past censors and reintroduced Niven's signature likeness to the world. The critical revival culminated in his role as Phileas Fogg in Around the World in 80 Days, a film that not only won Best Picture, but cemented Niven as the very image of debonair. Then came Separate Tables, a film where Niven, in only 23 minutes of screen time, gave a performance so subtle and powerful that it won him the 1959 Academy Award for Best Actor. He made Oscar history as the only man to win the award while also hosting the ceremony. His career now reborn, he charmed again in Please Don't Eat the Daisies, The Guns of Navarone, and The Pink Panther, slipping with ease between action, comedy, and quiet melancholy. Through the 60s and 70s, he was everywhere. On TV with The Rogues, in Europe with French box office hits, in spy spoofs like Casino Royale, and even trading quips on Oscar night with Naked Stage Streakers. His later roles might not have matched the prestige of his earlier work, but Niven had evolved into something rarer, a living symbol of a fading Hollywood era. Even when illness overtook him, he remained elegant. ALS took his voice, but not his wit. His lines in his final Pink Panther films were dubbed by Rich Little, but Niven carried it all with grace, never publicly complaining. Off-screen, he wrote 4 books, most notably The Moon's a Balloon and Bring On the Empty Horses, both wildly successful and delightfully unreliable memoirs. He was a gifted storyteller who mixed truth with mischief, lending his own life the same sparkle he gave to his characters. Whether playing a con man, a commander, or simply himself, David Niven lived as though charm were a superpower. And for nearly 5 decades, it absolutely was. Perched gracefully along the radiant coastline of Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat in the French Riviera, there exists a villa that seems less like a residence and more like a whispered legend in pastel pink. Known today as Villa La Fleur du Cap, or by its more storied moniker, the David Niven Villa, this extraordinary estate is woven tightly into the golden fabric of Mediterranean glamour and cinematic history. Its tale begins not with film reels or red carpets, but with olive oil. Built in 1880 for Albert Bunin, a wealthy merchant from Nice, the villa was originally conceived in the height of the Belle Époque, a time when architectural elegance met seaside serenity in spectacular fashion. For decades, it remained a relatively quiet retreat, basking in the sunlight and sea breeze, its charm tucked away behind walls and gardens. But fate had more flamboyant plans for this tranquil escape. In 1962, the villa passed from Bunin's descendants into the hands of none other than David Niven, the suave British actor known for his debonair charm, and his equally magnetic wife, the Swedish model and actress Hjördis Genberg. From that moment forward, the estate shifted gears from genteel retreat to Riviera icon, blossoming into a haven for jet-setters and old Hollywood royalty. On any given summer evening, the villa might play host to Grace Kelly, Prince Rainier, or a scattering of European aristocrats sipping cocktails on its ocean-facing terrace, while the cicadas hummed in the surrounding pine trees. Framed by sweeping views of the Mediterranean and nestled within lush, meticulously landscaped gardens, the villa became a scene of timeless elegance. And by the early 1980s, it had gained a new visual signature, the soft, romantic pink paint chosen during the filming of the Pink Panther, a color that would come to define it just as much as its famous owners. The hue, paired with its classic French architecture, ensured that the house would become not just a private home, but a landmark. David Niven's death in 1983 brought a quiet close to that glamorous chapter, but Hjördis continued to live in the villa until 1996. When she sold it to contemporary artist and gallerist Anna Maria Tsarfati, the house entered yet another phase, trading celebrity soirees for creative reinvention. And yet, no matter who owns it, the soul of the villa remains tethered to Niven. So much so that the town itself honored his legacy by naming the square just outside Place David Niven, a rare gesture in France for a foreign entertainer, and a silent nod to the way he imprinted himself not only on the silver screen, but on the Riviera's heart. Today, the villa remains an enchanting vision, blushing in its signature pink, perched like a dream over the sea. It is a living love letter to a bygone era of elegance, charm, and cinematic cool. A place where the ghosts of laughter, stardom, and summer breezes still linger between the shutters and olive branches. Tucked behind high iron gates and veiled in ivy on the outskirts of London lies a ghost of opulence. A mansion that once held the promise of grandeur, but now crumbles in silence. Though David Niven is more famously associated with sun-drenched villas along the French Riviera and chalet-styled luxury in the Swiss Alps, whispers suggest the dashing actor once owned this enigmatic London property, likely during the hazy stretch between the early 1960s and 1970s. The details are elusive, as if the house itself was never fully meant to be known. But walk through the shattered doors now, and you step into a world that feels suspended in time and surrendered to nature. The glamour is gone, or rather, it's been buried under years of rain, rot, and retreat. Mold crawls up once ornate walls, chandeliers lie like fallen crowns across dust-choked floors, and thick, wild ferns burst through cracked stone as if the earth has decided to reclaim its due. Ceilings sag or have entirely collapsed in places, revealing ribs of wood and beams against the gray London sky. Some say Niven intended the house as a retreat. Others speculate it was an ambitious renovation, abandoned when his attention turned elsewhere. Perhaps the home was a metaphor for something he never found in London, a stillness or privacy he found more comfortably in France or Switzerland. Whatever the reason, it stands now as an eerie relic of what might have been. Forgotten by the city that surrounds it, unclaimed by any real estate agent, it's a space adrift in memory. Less a home and more a monument to dreams that never made it to the screen. While on military leave in 1940, David Niven met Primula Primi Susan Rollo, a bright, beautiful young woman who would swiftly and deeply change his life. Their romance was immediate and intense, the kind that feels scripted for the silver screen, and by September of that same year, they were married. Their union brought 2 sons into the world, David Jr. in 1942 and James Graham in 1945. But tragedy struck just as their lives appeared to be settling into a joyful rhythm. Only 6 weeks after the family relocated to the United States, Primi died in a freak accident while attending a party at the Beverly Hills home of Tyrone Power and Annabella. She was playing a game of sardines, mistook a door for a closet, and fell down a stone staircase to the basement, fatally fracturing her skull. She was just 28. Grief, however, didn't stop life from moving forward. In 1948, Niven encountered someone who seemed to walk straight out of a romantic fantasy. Hjordis Paulina Tersmaden, a stunning Swedish model with auburn hair and striking gray eyes. The moment he saw her, he later recalled, he practically fell apart. "Champagne in my knees," he said. The two married, though their relationship proved to be anything but a fairy tale. Behind the glamour, their marriage was marred by tension and turbulence that shadowed their otherwise glamorous public life. By 1960, Niven had settled into an elegant yet somewhat reclusive lifestyle, splitting his time between a chalet in the alpine Swiss village of Château d'Oeuf and a sun-soaked villa in Cap Ferrat on the Côte d'Azur. His Swiss home placed him among a notable circle of expatriates that included Deborah Kerr, Peter Ustinov, and Noel Coward, creating a community of glittering personalities far from Hollywood, but just as dazzling. Many believed his relocation and tax exile status may have played a part in him never receiving a British honor, though his equally expatriated friends, Kerr, Ustinov, and Coward, were not overlooked. Over the years, rumors swirled around Niven's private life, including whispers of a romantic entanglement with Princess Margaret, who was 2 decades his junior. Whether true or myth, the story added to his air of mischievous charm. He also formed close friendships with American intellectuals William F. Buckley Jr. and his wife Pat, bonds that endured until Niven's final years. Buckley would later pen a heartfelt tribute to his friend in Miles Gone By, capturing the affection and wit that seemed to follow Niven wherever he went. In the final chapters of David Niven's life, the elegant charm that had defined him began to fade beneath the weight of a devastating illness. It all began subtly. By 1978, he was losing weight. By 1980, fatigue and slurred speech had set in. His appearances on talk shows with Michael Parkinson and Merv Griffin caused widespread concern. The famously sharp-witted actor appeared strangely off, prompting whispers about possible drinking or a stroke. Niven, with typical grace and deflection, blamed his slurred voice on the long shooting days of his latest film, Better Late Than Never. But the truth was far more serious. He had been diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. Despite the physical decline, Niven continued to make public appearances, one of the last being his role as host at the 1981 American Film Institute tribute to his old friend, Fred Astaire. It was a fitting final curtain call in Hollywood, a nod to the golden age he helped define. By February 1983, his condition had worsened. He checked into a hospital under an alias, hoping to keep the press at bay. After a brief stay, he returned to the sanctuary of his alpine chalet in Château d'Eux, Switzerland, where he had spent much of his later life. True to character, Niven refused further hospitalization, a decision his family respected. He chose to remain at home, surrounded by the familiar comforts of his own world, and passed away peacefully on July 29, 1983, at the age of 73. His funeral was modest, held quietly in the village cemetery of Château d'Eux on August 2nd. But his life was honored on a grander scale later that year, with a Thanksgiving service held at London's St. Martin-in-the-Fields on October 27th. The pews were filled with 200 mourners, friends, peers, and royalty. Prince Michael of Kent, Laurence Olivier, David Frost, Joanna Lumley, Richard Attenborough, Trevor Howard, and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. were among those who came to remember a man who had made life just a bit more dazzling. And in one of the most touching tributes, the porters at Heathrow Airport sent the largest wreath of all, accompanied by a note that read, "To the finest gentleman who ever walked through these halls." He made a porter feel like a king. Even after death, Niven's image endured. In 1985, he appeared on a British postage stamp alongside cinematic greats like Hitchcock, Chaplin, and Vivien Leigh, commemorating British Film Year. His suave persona also lived on in pop culture, inspiring the look of Commander Norman in Thunderbirds and even DC Comics villain Sinestro, a curious nod to the actor whose smile could charm an audience, or a camera, with equal ease. Years later, his Bonjour Tristesse co-star Mylène Demongeau would remember him fondly in a 2015 interview. "He was like a lord," she said. "Elegance, class, humor. He was part of that rare breed of actors like Dirk Bogarde." But even the ever-gallant Niven had his limits. She recalled the one time she saw him lose his legendary British composure. A mix-up with director Otto Preminger led to Niven being prematurely dismissed for the day and whisking himself off to gamble in Deauville, only to be urgently retrieved by helicopter when Preminger changed his mind. "He came back furious," she laughed, "and for once he let it all out. It was royal." It was, in a way, the perfect description of David Niven himself: charming, polished, but undeniably human. A gentleman to the end, with just the right amount of mischief under that impeccable exterior.